Asperger's syndrome is a disorder within the autism spectrum. Autism itself is a complex developmental disability that typically appears during the first 3 years of life and affects a person's ability to communicate and interact with others. Autism is defined by a certain set of behaviors and is a spectrum disorder that affects individuals differently to varying degrees. In the United States, the prevalence of children born with autism is 1 in 88, with 1 in 54 boys being diagnosed. Asperger syndrome is a disorder subset from the autism spectrum disorders, characterized by social impairment, communication difficulties, restrictive, repetitive, or stereotyped patterns of behavior. The prevalence of Asperger's is estimated to be 1 in 250 children, with almost 3 to 4 times more boys being referred for this disorder. People with Asperger's syndrome are among the most high-functioning on the autism spectrum because, by definition, they cannot possess a clinically significant cognitive delay. This means that most possess average to above average intelligence. Another key difference between Asperger's syndrome and other autism spectrum disorders is the lack of speech delay in people with Asperger's. Children and adults with the syndrome frequently have good language skills. This may sometimes use language in different or unconventional ways. Diagnosis of children with Asperger's usually occurs after the age of 3, with most being diagnosed between the ages of 5 and 9. The diagnosis process is based highly on observation and looks into the behaviors of the child. The Asperger's Syndrome Diagnostic Scale is a 50-item behavior rating scale. With this scale, the items used for diagnosis are categorized into 5 subscales, which include language, social, maladaptive, cognitive, and sensoromotor behaviors. The exact causes of Asperger's syndrome are not known. However, the fact that it tends to run in families suggests that a tendency to develop the disorder may be inherited and is therefore passed on from parent to child. According to autismspeaks.org, most cases of autism appear to be caused by a combination of autism risk genes and environmental factors influencing early brain development. It is important to note that the environmental factors may influence the risk, but are not the definite cause. Being that the nature of the syndrome is defined by a series of symptoms, it is very difficult to pinpoint one definitive cause. The severity of Asperger's syndrome differs from person to person and levels in ways that is manifested in the behavior and development of the child. As was previously mentioned, this form of autism can affect a student's interpersonal, motor, and language or communication skills. A teacher needs to know the students and adapt the classroom arrangement, lessons, presentations of curriculum, and pay attention to in-classroom interactions. There are some important characteristics of students with Asperger's syndrome that affect their education. While these traits are not shared by all students with Asperger's, they are often present and can affect their educational experiences. Students with Asperger's are likely to prefer to speak or learn about one topic and may have a difficult time being asked to switch or learn something new. This will affect their interest in curriculum materials. The student's intelligence is still very high and can often lead teachers to assume that they should know better when it comes to controlling these fixations, but this is often a manifestation of their disorder. Though this can create difficulties in keeping them on task when doing unrelated assignments, it can also be seen as an asset to the classroom. Engaging the student in their specific topic of interest could help them reach a new level of depth and understanding. Students with Asperger's often have different ways of acquiring knowledge that are not met through normal classroom interaction. For example, like many other students, they may not learn well from listening to lectures and need to be reached in another way. A student with Asperger's syndrome will often react negatively to the inevitable changes that occur throughout schooling. Small changes to daily schedules or larger changes in terms of environment may cause stress to the students and make learning difficult. It is best to give them a schedule as consistent as possible and warn them of anything that may be different in their day. This consistency carries over to teaching because the student is more primed for success if they know how to expect and handle the curriculum. Students with Asperger's may require accommodations and/or modifications to be successful in the classroom. For example, a student may have to go into another classroom or request to be by themselves when taking a test or quiz. Being clear and thorough with instructions is equally important, as is the way in which instructions are given. A child would benefit from knowing the details of what they need to accomplish and the steps to take this. Students with Asperger's are easily overwhelmed, so anything to break up large quantities of information, as well as sensory information, should be taken. The expectation should always be clear, with a large amount of structure for each activity. Students with Asperger's in school and life in general revolve around social interactions. Inappropriate social interactions are common among children with Asperger's syndrome. They might develop fixations on certain topics and subject matter, and will persistently try to insert this information into normal conversation. Behavior like this can be problematic because students often interrupt their teacher or peers, and by changing the subject become a distraction to others. In other cases, students with Asperger's syndrome may try to lecture other students by telling them repeatedly what they should or should not do. This behavior creates an unpleasant environment, as other students become upset or annoyed with the constant lecturing. In both instances, the student with Asperger's syndrome will most likely become isolated, as their classmates struggle to maintain normal relationships with them. This isolation could then increase their social awkwardness as they continue to not develop positive relationships, thus perpetuating the cycle. Our group has compiled 10 recommendations for parents and teachers or other professionals who work with children that have Asperger's syndrome. Recommendations are based on creating a comforting atmosphere for the child. Our first recommendation focuses on catering to the individual. It's imperative to pay attention to the unique aspects of the student. For example, if the student has a negative reaction to the class change bell, then the teacher should warn the class when it is about a minute before the bell rings, so the student is not surprised by it. This is connected to maintaining a consistent schedule. Establishing a routine early on in the year so that the student can become comfortable in the school setting allows the student to gradually build upon their independence as they know what is expected from them on a daily basis. This is also related to the student's need for a reduction of the amount of environmental changes. Keeping the majority of the classroom environment consistent in its arrangement as well as time management will be beneficial to the student. Actions such as rearranging the classroom desk or computers frequently throughout the year could add stress to the student's learning experience because they often react negatively to these changes. When it comes to giving directions for a project or assignment in class, it's important to be very clear and repetitive with its instructions as well as the social behavior expected during that time. The teacher needs to communicate clearly and be sure to remind the student that if he or she has any questions, they are encouraged to ask them. For each assignment, make sure steps and procedures are outlined in detail and concisely repeated as needed. Being aware of the student's needs also allows you, the teacher, to engage the students in assignments that use multiple intelligences. Often students with Asperger's syndrome cannot take in oral language quickly, and presenting information visually or kinesthetically may be more helpful. The teacher should provide a clear written set of instructions with a schedule for completion of each assignment. A written copy of notes like an outline could be given to accompany oral lectures. This will help the student learn and also benefit the other students in the class. Another way for teachers to assist students with Asperger's syndrome is to make thoughtful accommodations for group assignments. Students need to have an atmosphere that can allow them to be productive in their own work. This can be affected by both where they sit and who they get to work with. Teachers should put the students in a group where they appear to be the most comfortable, or even let the student pick what group they would like to be in. Either way, keep a close watch for potential issues within the group while they work with class. Students with Asperger's should be tutored on social cues, like proper verbal interactions, reading facial expressions, and just generally being aware of those around them. The teacher should take time to meet with the students privately to teach them more about these skills, and to put the student in groups where he or she may feel more successful and comfortable in their social interactions. Since structure and regularity are important for students with Asperger's syndrome, strategizing with other teachers helps find specific methods that work for particular students and ensure that they are used consistently from classroom to classroom. For example, teachers should find what method of organizing a binder works for the student. Make sure the binders for each class he takes are organized in the same way. Our final recommendation is to use student interest as a catalyst for interacting with their classmates and learning specific skills. This allows students to use their fixations in a positive way. For example, if a student is interested in planets, help them create a presentation about Pluto that can be presented to the whole class. This not only builds skills in language arts, but also again helps her classmates see value in what the student has to offer. If you'd like more information about Asperger syndrome, here are 5 good resources for you to visit. The Asperger Syndrome and High Functioning Autism Association, which provides support and general information for parents and professionals. Asperger Syndrome Education Network. Every year they sponsor a conference for families and professionals on Asperger's in New Jersey. The online Asperger Syndrome and Support, built to support families and friends of those people with Asperger's. Among other resources, it provides a list of national and local organizations that support those who have Asperger's. Families of Adults Affected by Asperger Syndrome. It's a support group for families and members of adult individuals with Asperger's. It reminds its members that Asperger's never disappears and will continue to be a part of an individual's life long after high school. And Autism Speaks, an autism science and advocacy organization dedicated in part to funding research into causes, prevention, treatment, and cures for autism, and advocating for the needs of individuals with autism and their families. The site is especially useful for professionals and parents who want to keep up with the latest advancements in autism research.